Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Back at you in Gloves Off. I'm Professor Buitrón. I'm here with a great friend, somebody that I consider a brother, somebody that was by my side in the beginning when we first started Savant way back when, and he started Thai boxing at the same time. And roads kind of took us to different levels, and we got kind of cooked back up. And guess what? To me, he's one of the best Thai boxing coaches on this side of the Pacific, in my point of view. And his name is.
Well, I want to argue with you there.
Jason, how you been, man?
I'm good, Paul. It's good to talk to you.
It's good talking to you. It's good to see you. And
yeah, good to be seen. It beats being viewed.
Pardon?
I said it's good to be seen. It beats being viewed.
Absolutely. I had a great friend of mine that used to say that all the time. It goes, "You're doing good. You're looking good."
Yeah, baby. Yeah, I know. You know, these guns, baby. Yeah, like that, man. Oh man.
You know, we're all both old man. Look at that. You know, gray beard.
Yeah. Look at that. Yeah, man. Shoot, I know it all too well.
You know, but you know, there's a lot of stuff that us old farts can teach a bunch of the young guys that are coming up. And there's a lot of stuff that's been lost. And
yeah, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? But let's touch base.
Okay.
You've been around for a long time. You've been here in Texas for
thanks, Paul. Yeah, I've been around a long time. Right.
And what we're going to talk about is what has changed in Thai boxing from, I say, the 90s to the present. What, especially here in the U.S.
Well, I mean, if you really look back in the early 1990s, Muay Thai boxing was not really well known at all. It wasn't until about 1994, maybe 95, or early 95, when, some of the first fighters really started appearing on like UFC, like when they were still kind of like banned in the United States in different places and stuff. So it quickly, within just a couple of years, it became, like a training staple of any mixed martial artist. And that's really the main avenue for Muay Thai in the United States. Still, like this, you see ambush Muay Thai is really the school of one of my top student. He's a brilliant trainer, Elton Wells. So, I just basically, just as an aside, I decided several years ago, just because of my age and my, profession, everything, that I really didn't want to open my own school, and that's was going to be my avenue. I just decided, look, what I want to do is help my students be successful. And so that's really what I try to do is, if one of my students, and Elton's probably the top one I spend time with, and that I'll help them promote and get, Muay Thai going and everything, or something similar if they need me for coaching for fights and stuff. But as a rule, I don't want to be in competition with my own students, and that's really not my dream anyway. Is to make Muay Thai grow. I've already really accomplished what I wanted to, which was to help seed that. So, anyway, but I was about to say that, like ambush Muay Thai, like that gym is only Muay Thai, right? It's successful. It's only been around about 2 years, but we've got a ton of amateur titles anyway, and but basically it only teaches Muay Thai. And in most places, what you'll find is that there's not a Muay Thai gym; it's part of an MMA gym, and so you really don't get real or pure Muay Thai, if you will. And so I would say that's something that's hard for many people to really understand. What is real Muay Thai? As apart from the elements of Muay Thai that have been picked up in professional fighting.
Absolutely. But it's kind of like what happened with Savant. We kept it here, and it's the same thing. But Savant has just been kind of brushed off. It's Muay Thai picked up and it went on, and I'm so proud of that's happening, especially in the world of pugilism. We need those to come back up, and
Yeah.
things like that occur, and a lot of people don't. They saw the folks coming in, like you said, coming into UFC and making a big bang into it. People started looking at it. There's also been movies followed up on that. And most of the Muay Thai that you see is somebody that might have seen a video or might have seen some seminar someplace and teaching that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad to see that, but in a way, it's good to see that it's being out in the open, and just like everything else, just like boxing, just like Savate, just like Muay Thai, there's good teachers and there's bad teachers and so on and so forth. But
Oh yeah.
but the beauty here is that it's grown all over,
Sure.
And,
I mean, I myself, I mean, you have to consider, like, when I came from Dallas, came back to Dallas after leaving Thailand. Most people don't really understand, like when I came back from Thailand, to Dallas, in, I don't know, was 1991, maybe early, or something like.
it was 90, 89, because I left in 90, so you were there before.
So, well, yeah, but we met in between trips.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I went back to Thailand.
Yeah, and then you went back, and then I went back. Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then we didn't see each other till about 94. And then I blew my hand and I didn't fight anymore. Remember?
Yeah. And what I was about to say, like, when I came back, let's say really back in 91, and I was actually looking to, to fight again. I got injured too. Might hurt my hand, wrist actually. But at that point, like, they didn't even allow leg kicks in fights in Texas, right? Like, that's how far away from Muay Thai we were, right? Like, so,
Absolutely.
Like Bill Wallace was still, like, on his soapbox against Muay, they're breaking their knees, and then it's like, shit, I never saw anything like that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct.
But I mean, most people don't really realize that, like, like when I came back, like, couldn't even compete in Texas, right? Because it's not allowed. The only place, there's only a couple of states that even had fights with leg kicks, and we're not even talking about knees and elbows, right? Like, so it's quite a bit different scene to where, let's say, we just had some fights last night, amateur card here in South Texas. It's close. Well, it was actually in Galveston County. But like those fights are pretty much full Muay Thai fights. Well, there's 3 rounders because they're amateurs, and they wear elbow pads for the elbow. But it's like pretty much full Muay Thai, right?
Absolutely.
But the point is that there are very few organizations even promoting Muay Thai at this point. It's all been about MMA for years. And so the growth of Muay Thai has been much slower, as, let's say, if you compared it to England or France, right? Like, they have own amateur associations with fights, and, like, an amateur fighter coming out there can get fights. Here, it's hard for a fighter to get a Muay Thai fight, or enough Muay Thai fights, to go pro, to to work your way up into, say, let's something like one championship, right? Like, very difficult to get the international fights. And to go back to what you said about how things changed in Thailand, like, it's when I lived in Thailand, like, it was, I don't want to beat, bang my own drum or anything like that, but it's real different. Like, like now you can just go train somewhere. You can look up on the internet and find out, oh yeah, whether it's in southern Thailand, which is much easier to train at basically, or Bangkok, you can find camps that will take you in. And you can get directions even. What do you know? Use your GPS in Thailand and get there. When I lived there, I'll be honest, like, people don't really understand. Like, when I lived there, it took me months to find a camp. I had to have an introduction, because you couldn't just go meet the people, like they had to have an honest interest in you, right? Because they didn't have an interest in you, then you had no reason to be there, right? Because they didn't like entertain. This was not a vacation spot, right? Or you didn't go do vacation Muay Thai. It was just like they had to see you as a fighter before they allowed you to be part of their camp, because otherwise there's just no reason for you to be there, right?
Absolutely. I remember. It's the same way. I remember when we came back, we had the Texas Association of Savant, back
Mhm.
back then, shit.
Yeah.
It was in 90 was when
90s.
they formed it. You remember? And you
Yeah.
used to be part of it as well. And we had the first fights of Savant. And we had fights of Savant in Dallas 91, 92, 93, 94. 94, in one of our fights, the head boxing commissioner, Dickie Cole, was sitting there.
Yeah.
He comes up and he goes, "Who's regulating is what the Texas Association of Savant is." And he goes, "Yeah, okay." So all of a sudden we were talking to him, and we had a long conversation. We went to Austin.
Yeah.
And in 96, they passed it. So we were the first state, and to the day, the only state that can hold a Savant match,
Yeah.
And you could kick to the legs, you can do everything else. And they didn't want us to use a shoe, but then they wanted us to be barefooted. You remember all that stuff. And
Yeah.
and I remember the French came over, and the president at that time of the international came over, and we were talking about how many accidents they had, so on and so forth. So they passed, but it was like moving Mount Everest, to California to do it. And we had some great fights. It started out great, and it was doing great. We had nationals. We had some international fights here. We had some great fighters from all around Texas and the U.S. And all of a sudden, we got hit with 9/11, and we had two wars, and all of a sudden it just decimated all the competitors and schools of Savant.
Yeah.
In one blow. So, and right now it's kind of it's hard because, number one, just like you going through and you've seen, and like you said, it's not a vacation Muay Thai, and it's for people that really want to learn how to fight in the ring, and it's the same thing. It's just like boxing.
Well, I'd say though, like what you said about, I'm probably preaching to the choir to say this to you, but some of your viewers may not really understand. We sound like probably a bunch of middle-aged old men squawking about shit like, this is messed up. That used to be so much better. But honestly, the biggest part of that is there's some really crummy teachers out there. I'll be honest. And I was getting to that, like where we were, like, I've watched the growth of, like, to go from 91, let's say, where, they don't even have leg kicks in Texas, to already having these full-blown amateur fights. Like the matchmaker last night for the fights, all the fights were excellent, by the way. Like, but the matchmaker last night is, one of Elton's students, who runs a couple of Muay Thai gyms in San Antonio. I'm just saying though that like our spread gets deeper and wider, and I'm glad to see that of real interest. But it's kind of interesting. Like I've watched it really grow over, let's say, the past 10 years. It's really grown a lot. But I go to these different venues and I see other coaches working with students, and I know they just don't have very good training, and it's like there's this brass ring for so many, like, oh, I want to go train in Thailand. Well, yeah, in my, it's hard to do that in the same sense now, right? Because now there's this whole, like, let's say if, there were separate tracks, there'd be this separate track for a foreigner coming in, right? Like, and they have, now they have, an understood way and rate, really, if you will, to get your money. But they don't necessarily will train you like a professional fighter, right? All the videos I see, even of, like, Tiger Muay Thai, or just one of the ones that are, have much more social media presence or something like that. Like, I don't see much training going on there with so many, because one thing I said earlier that I have to qualify is that like you couldn't go into a gym. That's not fully true. Like you could possibly find certain gyms, like Pet D was one gym. The Vorpen Muay Thai camp was another one where you could pay, but I was there, a number of times and saw how they treated people like that usually. And, they would take their money, of course, and they would just basically kick the back or something while the real fighters trained. And then at the end, they would take them for 15 minutes and work with them or something like that. That was training, but that's not really training. And so something similar goes on, I think, now, like where they have whole separate sort of sessions for the foreigners, right? And then the Muay Thai fight, the real Muay Thai fighters, if you will, ones that are Bangkok fighters and whatever, train in their own session. Does that make sense? Like, so you're not getting the same training, right? Because
for sure.
And so I'm just saying, so like, we might be older and like, but some of these things, like I say, I see some of the things that people teach their students, and I look at it and go like, shit, that's got to be off of Instagram or something. Because that's not Muay Thai,
No. Yeah.
Or it's very poor Muay Thai,
I feel the same way, and now with Savant, and the same thing, when I came back, I didn't know what I had done, I didn't know what I had done when I went over there. I had just gotten the scholarship to go. You remember that? And
sure.
Took off, and when I came back and back and forth, and I still didn't know until 94, 95 what I had actually accomplished. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
for sure.
You know what I'm saying? And and what I had actually accomplished, becoming the first there for the first dish, and you're like, and you could look back and people say, you did that? Well, somebody had to, I guess it was me, luck of the draw. I picked that straw, it's going to be you that's going to go out there. But, and so I'm very proud of what you've done, because you're a pioneer on this, you're the pioneer here. That's the way I look at it. The American pioneer of Thai boxing, even though there's,
well, I'm not the only pioneer, like, let's say,
sure, I understand. A pioneer.
Yeah, no, I mean, like one of my friends was, when I lived there, luckily, just by pure luck, was a guy named Dale Qualheim, sure. Who was, he was, he was I would say a real pioneer, like back in Vietnam era. He fought in northern Thailand mostly. But he was actually got ranked in one of the stadiums. Shit, I never was good enough to get ranked in Lumpini, but he was like that back in the 70s. Sure. But there weren't many, but was like when I lived in Thailand, just, to contextualize it, like I probably met a handful, half a dozen Americans the whole time I was there. Like that'll give you an idea from America. Like I met a lot, from as far as fighters go, the place for the most fighters at that time were the Dutch. Like, and they were, I met a number of Dutch guys coming over and trying to fight and stuff, but usually they were only there for a few weeks to a month or something. I was there for 2 years. It was really, it's not like today. Again, not like today. It's very different. You couldn't survive at that time without speaking Thai. And like people, it was funny. I went back to Bangkok about 3 years ago. I took my family. Hadn't been back since. Before that, previous to that, and everywhere I went, pretty much people were like, "Oh my God, your Thai is so good." I was like, and I knew that's bullshit. It was terrible, and spoke Thai really in 30 years, but I got along and could get around and stuff like that. They were just utterly amazed. But what I came to realize during that time, number one, is that all the time we spent driving around Bangkok. This was right after the ascension of the king, of the new king. There are now foreigners all over Bangkok, really, like in different parts of the city that I knew, like there would never be foreigners, and I would say there'd never be foreigners in that part because there weren't enough English speaking people. It's hard to live. So I see foreigners in different parts of the city, like, wow, this is really something. But I talk to people too who, go to Thailand, train in Thailand. most of them, they speak a lick of Thai. I came to realize, a lot of, probably by, the vast majority of the foreigners there don't speak Thai. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when I lived there, probably like in France, they want you to speak French, right? Like they don't give a shit. Everybody speak English.
I mean, when I was there, there was no other non-French doing Savant, period. On the last year that I was there, I was about to graduate. A guy came from Lebanon. He was from the army, and he was in one of the gyms that he was in Clichy, and we kind of became friends. And I took him to my professor's school,
Yeah,
Patulea, and
sure.
we did all that and everything else, and we kind of became friends. And he went back and he became, in Lebanon, he went back in Lebanon, tried to open up a kickboxing school over in Lebanon,
Yeah,
and disappeared within time. But there were no foreigners. Even to the day, there's no foreigners
right.
in France doing so much.
Yeah.
And you're like,
But that's kind of what I'm saying, that, like the proliferation of that, like there are plenty of foreigners, right?
yeah,
And plenty of
well,
Americans, but still that doesn't mean that Muay Thai, real Muay Thai is, is there's plenty of Muay Thai here. And I tell people, like, here's another great example. Like, I've always, my entire career, I have always advocated strongly the use of the knee. Because people say, "Ah, man, elbows or whatever," and I'd be like, "Hey, look, if you want to win, if you want competitive advantage, spend your time with the knee." And that got poo-pooed. Like when I was training MMA fighters, some of your listeners may not know, right? Like, I've trained number of world-class MMA fighters, some UFC fighters, just some of the top flight promotions over the years. But by the way, I don't like doing that type of work a whole bunch because it doesn't pay real well and it's pretty hard. It's a lot of time. Anyway, I've been training MMA fighters a long time, involved with that group because that was the group that wanted to do Muay Thai. But as a rule, they're like they never thought, you can't use the knee because of wrestling. But you see now that's not really true. But you can also see like how many people are adopting real Muay Thai, or really have good, Muay Thai techniques in their MMA. It's few, and it's not because there's a lack of people to teach. There have been Muay Thai champions teaching this since the 70s in the United States.
sure.
So what's the hold up? You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying like it's a bigger thing than just there's not quality teaching available or something. You know what I'm saying? It's that people are attracted to the wrong things. Basically, I'm saying when they're wanting to fight, they have these mental images of what fighting is about, and that's why you really need someone to help you sort of down that path usually, because if anyone has been in a fight, whether it's ring or in the street, you don't have a good your reflection on that is not very good. Like you have your reflection, it's not necessarily reality.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you really need someone with experience to help. And at this point, I'm an older man, right? Like somebody doesn't want my advice, that's cool, no problem. Right? Like
That's the way I feel. You want to come over here? I'll help you out.
Yeah,
have an open mind. I'll help you out whichever way. I stopped taking the guys to the ring probably 2005. I just didn't have the space. 2005 was the last U.S. championships.
Yeah.
And then I took a team to Belgium, and both of the guys knocked out the guys over there. And all of a sudden, I was content with that. We came back, and all of a sudden, no more fighters. And it was kind of like, we were trying to start up a team about 8 years ago to just go to gold and take them to Golden Gloves. I used to take the groups over there. You remember in Dallas, I used to take them. And,
Sure.
I used to, there were no Savant fights. You know what? You're going to go in the ring. Where are we going to go in the ring? You're going to go box. You need ring time.
Yeah, ready
You
in the
know,
shit.
you need plain and simple. You need ring time. And people said, "Well, really? Yeah." So we produced some darn good boxers back then, and very great. You know, very. And it just got to a time it was other things happened, and now it's kind of like, the fight game here, or the boxing game here in Laredo has taken off, which I'm proud that it did. And it's going that well. And I think pugilism slowly but surely is coming up. So you're going to start. That's why I'm very proud of the work that you all have done, especially with Thai boxing, because it's phenomenal. My wife and I were with the kids. We're doing that stick fighting. We had gone to Houston to do some stick fighting over there. And in Houston, there was a world champion fighter from Clichy, he was from Savant. And he called me up on Facebook. Hey, you're over here. You're in Houston. I'm going to go meet you. And he goes, let's go watch some Thai boxing fights. I go,
Yeah.
where? So we went downtown Houston. They had a gym upstairs, and they were doing Thai boxing fight. We stayed there for about 3 hours. People were fighting it out, and I was like, man, I wonder if Jason's around here. So I looked in the crowd, and you weren't around. I go, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm glad that this is actually happening.
Sure.
And said, and then we left, and I said, man, that's the way it should be done. But so unfortunately, so I didn't take it. Maybe later on, maybe the next generation comes here can take it. But it's
For sure.
It's,
Hey, Paul,
it's,
I don't have natural. I've just got natural light. It's about gone.
yeah.
And
But
my phone battery's about dead too. So
listen, something for the folks out there. If people want to get a hold of you, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Why don't they just go through you for now?
All right.
You give them my contact info. I'm fine. Like, I give pretty liberally of my time. People interested. So if a question or whatever, please send me an email. You get that from Paul. If you have some pressing matter, want to talk to me, get my phone number, call me. If you don't have much to say, we won't be on the phone very long.
Jason, it's a pleasure, my brother. But huge hugs.
Yeah,
We'll
Paul, thank you,
because you're going to come down here, and folks, here in Laredo, we're going to be doing a workshop on April 9th. It's open to anybody. Come on over, have some good fellowship.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Absolutely.
And
Look forward to it,
Paul.
All right, man. Okay.